All right, everybody, what's up? Welcome to Eppy number 3 of the after show presented by Poster. It's great to have you here with us again. We're kind of edging towards the middle of summer, and it's been so good the last couple weeks for you guys joining us and listening. This is basically a show just to follow up our Sunday teaching and themes, just talking about it with some really fine people around the horn. We have Sergeant Nicole, obviously Kevin and Kathy and Kendra. How's everybody doing? You guys doing all right? Good to see you. Good. And we just had a great talk off air. Wish you could have heard it. We should do like a Patreon. We should do a Patreon account and get people to pay to hear what we were just talking about. It was fantastic, but it was totally off the record. So sorry about that one. It's good to be back together. I really feel like these are like the back deck moments. I was thinking today, if I was a part of a community, I would listen to this. Like I would listen to this because I think you glean some stuff. The church should be the work of the people, if you're with me. And so I'm just appreciative of you guys and just hearing from you all. Well, I guess the first thing we got to do is we've already acknowledged our sponsor. Somehow we ended up with a sponsor, as well as Geico. No, but we also have. Okay, so I was thinking, Kendra, your story last week about homeschooling and reading words. You're reading words. Remember talking about reading words, but not necessarily knowing how to say them. You remember? Yes. Am I all right to bring this up? Is this?
Oh yeah.
Am I uncovering? Okay, we're good. All right. So I was thinking
nothing if not self-deprecating. So it's okay.
Okay, nice. So I was thinking, when I was reading Harry Potter, here's a Harry Potter reference. Ding! We should have a Harry Potter reference every episode. With Hermione, I didn't because I just started reading. I did not know that was her. I did when you first read Hermione, I forget what in my head I was thinking it was, but it definitely was not Hermione. You following me?
It's not Hermione.
Is it Hermione?
Yeah. It's Hermione.
What?
So,
but that's the English accent in it. Okay, so tell me what.
But it
oh
is
my
it's
gosh!
an English book, though.
It's Hermione. Is it not Hermione?
No, it's an English book.
See, I read the books before I watch the movies. Please, okay, so say it again.
Hermione.
Okay, so either way, I was reading this book, and I was like, I forget the word in my head of what I was thinking it was, and now we have philodendron. Is this Phil in the back? So how do you say Hermione's name?
Hermione.
Hermione?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? I'm 4 books deep, 3 movies I've watched, and it's Hermione.
I'm really sad. Do all your kids say it wrong too?
Yeah, I would imagine they do because I think this is.
Oh no!
Do you want me to? They're sleeping right now. Do you want me to wake them up? And
I need you to tell them before they
tell
their friends.
I legit want to pull Ava out of her bed and in her pajamas.
Yeah.
Hermione. She probably knows that. I thought it was Hermione. Anyways, it's all good. How's Phil doing?
If it makes you feel any better, I was exactly 20 when I realized it was pronounced potpourri rather than potpourri.
Okay, so there's a good
little known. There's like a few, yeah.
So nobody said that around you to kind of correct what you read as potpourri? No, that's all right.
My mom wasn't a big potpourri person.
That's all.
I did grow up in the 90s, but I guess didn't have that in my life.
It's all good.
It is good. And Phil is doing well. He's got 2 shoots.
Nice.
Which I'm very proud of, actually. The second shoot, I'm pretty sure just started growing in the last this year. So
sweet. Guys, no Sharpie. It's okay. No Sharpie, but we're
not yet. I really got to do that.
We're glad he's growing, and it's philodendron, right?
He's starting to curl back up, though,
perfect.
Can you see this?
By the time we're done, that whole thing will be like the outfield in Wrigley Field. Just the whole
your whole backyard, the whole backdrop is just going to be that. Yeah.
Do they normally do that? Because I was wondering, at some point, am I going to have to trim this poor guy? Because he's maybe a 1.5 from the floor.
When did you get him?
It's going to keep growing. You're going to have to cut it down.
So you just trim him?
You just trim him, yeah.
Well, not this summer. Let him grow and we'll watch it. Just
Phil.
turn it in the different direction, and it can go up.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you want him on the ground? Because you could probably just twist him up a little bit so he can grow back up again, and then you twist him back up again.
Yeah. I say
this
that's
is
what
my
we
first one, guys. This is why we needed to talk about it.
And we're all in this together. Here's a question for you: Is reading an audiobook, like reading audiobooks, does that go on the list for books read?
100%.
Yes.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Oh, we've got a naysayer, right?
I'm
Does
only
it?
saying yes enthusiastically because I read my first audiobook the other day.
I like how you preface that you read your first audiobook too. It's good.
But you didn't read it.
I read it.
See, this is the tension.
Well, when you read, you're hearing it in your head. It's the same thing. I'm not reading out loud all the books I read.
I think
That's what I'm claiming.
I think Kendra's skeptical, but for the summer, I've jumped back in, and I just feel like, when we get back to our social gatherings, I'll be able to tell people, in the summer of 2020, I read 20 books, but probably 10 of them because I run every day for like 35, 40 minutes. So I'm just crushing some audiobooks right now. And I got thinking on my run today, is this legit? You don't think so though, Kendra?
Well, you could say that you listen to those books.
Yeah, but that's not.
But it's not the equivalent though. Like if you're like at the end of the year, you wouldn't be like, oh, like I read so many such books, you wouldn't count it.
Like, I don't want to say 100% because I'm just thinking about this now for the first time.
Yes, see,
so I can be swayed.
I knew this would spur on some
but
sort
I
of.
feel like reading is like optic nerve, imagination, like.
Oh, you can still have an imagination when
For
you're
sure.
listening to
I know,
audiobooks.
but doesn't reading have to do with the like medium of it?
See, this is kind
I guess
of.
not though, because you can read in like Braille and stuff, right?
See,
Yeah,
I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, the picture in your head is still the same, right? Whether you're listening to it or whether you're actually reading it. So I would think it would be the same whether it's your voice or whether it's someone else's voice speaking it to you, that you're kind of assimilating the information in the same way, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I only do audiobooks actually.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm like an avid audio, like London Public Library is my jam.
So
my jam.
do you? So to get that, do you use Hoopla? Is that what you use, Hoopla?
No, I use what is it?
Oh, you can.
What is it?
Libby.
Well,
right.
Libby, yeah. So Serge has my account on Libby, and then I have the old one, Overdrive, I think it is.
Overdrive. Yeah.
Yes, I have
But
Overdrive.
you can do Hoopla as well.
You can do Hoopla. Yeah.
So
I've heard of Hoopla now too.
that
But Hoopla has
involves
movies and stuff, right?
Yeah. So you get Overdrive or Libby or whatever, Hoopla 2, and then it goes to your device and you rent it for a certain amount of time and it goes away.
Yeah, just like you would get at a library book. Yeah.
Interesting.
You have it for 21 days, and I like because especially if there's like Michelle Obama's book or like some of the books that I really really like. I mean, I'm like number 156 or
Good
something
for you.
like that in line for the book, but
in line for the book. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A year and a half later, you get it.
yeah. Some of them you're like, you're gonna be forever waiting for, like the Harry Potter series. Oh my gosh, I waited forever for all of those ones.
Yeah.
But
It's a crazy concept.
So is there only one per library?
Say again?
Is there one per library?
No, you get up to like 12 books or something like that. Like
You can put up to 20
take out?
on hold.
No, I mean like of access to it from all of London. How many people?
Audiobooks have less. You can have less audiobooks because you buy the right to have it for a certain amount of time.
But it's not one per city or one per library.
No,
Yeah.
it's how many the library buys. But for example, the library could have 50 copies of one book if it's really popular, but really only like 3 audiobooks. Or 4.
Okay.
It's essentially just like buying 10 books and then distributing them to like various libraries and then having people rent them. Same thing as real books.
Got it. Well, I just reactivated my Audible account, and I knew this was very pressing because I got thinking, can I add these to my list? I think I will, and not tell anybody.
Yeah, 100%.
But there's Kev's like, this is the only way, man. This is
But what you got to do is you got to speed up the audio too.
Okay.
So it goes even quicker.
oh my god.
Here is my commitment, though.
Yes,
Here's my
Kevin.
commitment because I'm buying them. I'm only buying books that the actual author is narrating. I've tried that. We'll see. That I like it like that. It's an interesting concept as far as like buying these books, because obviously when you're done with them you can't really like pass them on and stuff, but interesting concept. But I think I'll add the narrating part. Sorry, the narrating part is I like it when the author themselves writes the book and speaks it, instead of like I had a Bonhoeffer bio once, and it was like some like very lethargic voice, and I was like, I can't do this. So anyways, all right, well maybe we'll have this settled by the end of the summer, but for now the audiobooks are going on the list. All right, let's do this. Let's take a couple minutes. Let's talk about the theme that we've been jumping into. So on Sunday was the first of 5 different principles or practices that Barna and these guys in this book called Faith for Exiles have really highlighted and drilled down on. These are the things that resilient disciples are practicing. These are the things that are happening. These are the kind of through our polling and some of the data that Barna has done. This is what it is. And so it was just interesting. The first thing that they found was what makes a resilient disciple is having a resilient identity in Jesus. So understanding your identity in Jesus and intimacy with God, or intimacy with Jesus, however you want to say it. And just would love to hear some feedback just on what you guys think. It's just interesting. We got into it last week just about identity. Maybe let's do this. Let's talk about kind of the Jesus brand experience compared to identity in Jesus. You know, we talked about that a little last week. Did that stand out at all? I know we got going again last week on this a little bit. Do you think, as far as the church and what it's producing as far as disciples, sometimes the Jesus brand experience is kind of something we see more than like a resilient identity in Jesus? What do you think? That makes sense?
I think that it's like the predominant, I would say, style of church or style of evangelicalism, if I can say that.
Yep.
In North America, at least. But I also would say that in the last 10 years, I maybe can't speak to the last 10 years that much because that's like my whole adult life.
No, you can.
So I don't super know what it was like. Okay. Well, I feel like in the last 10 years, we've seen a little bit more of a shift away from that. Like people have seen that and seen maybe that there's a lack of, authenticity to that. Mm-hmm. And then started some more subversive kind of churches. I think that's why we've seen more of a shift toward liturgy and some of the more like ancient texts, because people are looking for something a bit more rooted. And Brand Jesus is like all in your face, and it's I love brand. That's what I do for a living. It's great, and I love a good brand, but it doesn't belong in the same way in community, I think, especially in the church.
Yeah. So good. I can't that is so well said. I think I agree with you in most cases. I think in most cases, it'd be interesting to hear from everybody else. I do agree that the more people that are pressing into a more liturgical vision of community and church, I'm finding these people everywhere, especially with the vision of practicing the way of Jesus. People will often reach out to me and say, hey, I've been sensing and feeling this. And there's that commonality of the last 10 or 15 years were good, but have kind of left me empty. I've realized now, and this kind of different experience, I think that's very well articulated. I think there is a longing in a shift in people. What do you think? What do you guys think? And even what we talked about last week, maybe developing it more, do we need to be careful, kind of the Jesus brand experience, the industrial complex even that we sometimes see in the church, and what that leaves in comparison to identity?
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about certain things that the church does that I think really lacks depth. And for example, you can talk about blessings, right? There's recently, especially on social media, there's this thing about I'm blessed, or I feel blessed, or the whole idea of being blessed, right?
Yeah.
What does that mean? What does that really mean, right? Is that being like super comfortable and, having money and traveling to nice places, is that really being blessed? That's kind of the brand that people have taken, or young Christians have taken. So I think we need to be careful with that kind of stuff. What happens when, difficult times come around? Are we still blessed then? I think that's where maybe the pivoting towards a resilient Christian can come in, right? I am blessed despite my circumstances. So that's where I think I would make the distinction.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And what do you think, Karina's? Do you think they're the other side? It's just interesting as you get older. I know we're not that old, but I didn't even know this when we were kind of getting some voices together, that we all have grown up in the church. So we've seen some stuff along the way. Good things, maybe not so good things, depending on, your experience. But just with the brand stuff, do you feel like you kind of grow up a bit? You know what I'm saying? You mature. Like, the one thing I know about this group is, like, there's a maturing in this group, just in the way of Jesus, just knowing you guys as friends and stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that sometimes people have good motives and they're trying to sell you Jesus, and they're trying to talk about all the good things, right? Or not even just all the good things, but it just doesn't go very deep, right? Because when you're just doing a pitch. But I think I don't want to say there's a place for brand Jesus. That's not what I'm trying to say.
No.
But I think there was a time in my life where I wanted, I came from a different church, a Hispanic church that was the congregation was a lot older, and maybe we'll talk about this later in other chapters. But I was looking for that youth group experience where Jesus was really flashy. And I kind of took that initiative on myself, and looking back, I'm kind of proud of that, in the sense that, like, I could have just left the church like a lot of people in my older church did at my age, but I kind of went looking for that Jesus experience somewhere else. And then at that later on, as I grew up and as I matured, that wasn't enough, because I wanted something deeper, and I'm glad that I kind of stayed the course. But
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because we've often talked, and even I think about my own kids, thinking about kids and youth culture in the church. When you say I don't want, however you preface there, like, I don't want to say like there is room. It's interesting in different seasons what that looks like, because even Kevin, Kathy were part of our youth community way back in the day, and it wasn't like, as I look back, it was like a semi-revival. Like, seriously, you guys all know I don't use that word. I don't fly that word around, but and I don't use it lightly. But there was this like moment for a few years where kids especially a lot of kids from very broken homes and just different backgrounds were coming, and it was awesome. So I think you bring up something good in the sense of like wrestling through the room for that without making it the main thing, if you know what I'm saying. I don't know if I'm not making a question or that's a statement, but I don't think you can all throw it all out.
Yeah, no, like, I mean, I think there is a bit of a place for that. I think it can't stop there, and I think that's the beginning of it. And I think Serge hit the nail on the head. Like, I think there's just a lack of depth when it comes to a lot of our discipleship, and I think we've become such a hashtag culture kind of in the church, where we joke about it and gather to scatter, but
preface what gather to scatter is. Are we allowed to say what gather to scatter is?
Well, if you want,
you just throw it out there now. So go ahead, Kev. Tell everybody what gather to scatter is.
It's a Instagram group with Drew and myself and Drew's brother Mike, and we just we just send each other funny clips and things like that, and talk about
church.
Don't you love that name, things. Gather to Scatter? It's so 2000s. I love it.
No, but I mean, there's a lot of times, like, I find when I was younger, I think there was a time and a place where that, I don't know, it was more of an emotional experience, whereas it kind of stop there. And I think you need to get that bit of a draw when you're younger. Even as a first-time Christian, I think there's a way to, you should go into those moments being like, this was awesome, I want more, and not just being like, oh, just give me more, I'll only have that. Like, I want to learn more, I want to be in depth, I want to go through all that. Whereas, there's a lot of times, and we could talk about this forever, but there's a lot of times where these people that are mature Christians, and then you ask them, like, the blessed is in a perfect example, and you listen to a message, and every 5 seconds people are saying amen, or they're saying that's good and that kind of thing, and then you really ask them, be like, well, what did they say, or what does that even mean? And they don't even know.
The Instagram account.
We joked about that last week. Like, what does that even mean? And I think we talked about, Kathy and I kind of talked about last week, we were listening to some worship music, they were just talking about, by being blessed or blessing. And it was just kind of like, what exactly does that mean? So that's where I'm talking about, like, that lack of depth, where for me, that isn't good enough for me anymore. I need to know more. Like, I just want to grow even more.
Yeah. I actually, so for us, that's kind of a perfect example as well for actually what happened to us when we moved from the US to Canada. Because when we were going through that transition, I really felt a calling to Canada. I really felt like God was just really calling our family to Canada. I couldn't understand it either because we were so comfortable in Tennessee, and living in the Bible Belt. Your workplace is Christian. The church we go to, we attended a mega church. It was such a great church. It was, kind of the most perfect Christian environment that any Christian would ever want. But I, like you said, Kevin, was longing for something more. For me, especially, I felt like there was something else that God was calling us to that I couldn't understand what it was. And I know, we were at the same church the whole time we were living in Tennessee, but, we were like, they're so well organized. They run like such a well-oiled machine. They were like, they don't need us. Like, even to volunteer, we were hesitant to volunteer because we were like, they have so many ushers. They have, they really have everything they need. Like, we're, I struggle, at least personally, I struggle to really be like, well, how do I serve here? So one of the biggest things that I actually, when we finally sort of made the decision to move to Canada and things were kind of looking in that direction, I said to God, I want this to be an opportunity for you to challenge us as a Christian family. Like, this, for me, I want this to be a turning point. I had kind of gotten to that place of when Christianity just becomes like habitual, like a habit. There's no, like you said, no depth to it. No, I don't know, no stirring, no moving. Something is missing there that I felt in our lives. In that way, you're praying, your devotions, you kind of do everything that you're supposed to do. But I just felt like there wasn't a challenge almost of some sort. So I think for us moving to Canada, that was exactly it. And it was kind of funny because, we ended up in Royalview. And then just 2-3 months later after we got there, Drew announced in our little home church, we're starting a church. And, and it was just like, the path that God had taken us on in that way, started, kind of moving in that way with Drew and Heather, and with our little community, and starting at the time City View, I realized that was what God had almost called us to be, to challenge us in our faith and to make us a little bit uncomfortable in our Christian walk, because I feel like sometimes we're not meant to be comfortable. If that makes sense, because we continually need to be building resilience almost. For sure. And we need a challenge. We need to kind of go through the fire sometimes to get there.
No, so good. Just so good. And the classic with that is any form of growth takes resistance. So like when you're working out, you need resistance for a certain level of, and I think that applies. I do think like the way of Jesus is always beckoning, and there is resistance that leads to growth in that, for sure. It's interesting in our context. We don't have a youth pastor. We don't have a kids pastor. We're a smaller community in that sense. Primarily a millennial community that are now having kids, though, Serge, you may be, is it Gen Z, the one before? Just I think 38 is the end of millennials. So you just missed all
Definitely
of us.
Not millennial.
But we're in a context, and even Heather and I have talked. Like it's interesting how even for our own kids, we want them to have these vital experiences in the church, and beautiful experiences in some of the things even we've experienced over the years. But also on the other side now, as we've grown into adulthood, want it to be real. We saw a lot of people walk away because there were things, that Kathy, your example is really great, because like some of those moments for me were really shaping in my life as a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and even some of the things, I don't know, sensory wise that I felt and experienced in the Pentecostal church or at youth camps and all that. So we're trying right now to build both of those things, making sure our kids, like I want my kids to have certain experiences, but I also know when they come back from those things and we sit around the dinner table that there's a reality that you're going to go to college probably, or you're going to grow up, you're going to have a job and a vocation, you're going to have your own kids probably. There's no pressure on that, but you may have your own kids at some point, and you're going to grow up, and this thing is long and it's hard, and there's actually different practices that actually take you further. So I don't think it's necessarily throwing one out for the other. It's just interesting, again, that this is the first thing they drill down on as far as the practice of people who are resilient from data, like from things that they've seen. Building your identity and intimacy. Go. Yeah. What do you think?
I think something that's really telling is that when people leave the church, but they want their kids to have an experience of church, and maybe just not their kids, like their kids as young children, but also as teens, because clearly there was something impacting. Yeah. And I mean, maybe that just goes back to like, they think that the church just teaches morals, but there was something about it that they want for their kids, even if they don't want it for themselves anymore, or they feel like they've moved past that. So yeah, I think it was very formative for me.
For sure.
And if you think too, like at that time you are forming your identity quite a bit, and you're trying to decide all these things. And I think that we are brand saturated, but they are the most vulnerable group to be attracted to different brands and to sort of find which brand sort of speaks to them the most, and kind of that kind of thing. And so I don't think it's super dangerous. Like, I don't think it's really that bad that there's a brand of the church that teenagers might be attracted to. Mm-hmm. It's whether the environment there can actually, like Kevin said, ask deeper questions and go one step further and actually care about the individual and, make it a really good environment. As long as it goes beneath the brand,
Yeah, for sure. And sustainability, like the sustaining that. And that's, again, I think echoes kind of, as somebody who has kids in the church, wanting both those things for good experiences, because I think that's part of all of our lives. And then as well, just making sure, like, formation probably wasn't at the forefront. Spiritual formation wasn't necessarily as something at the forefront for a lot of generations that have, for a lot of people, it's easy for things to be built on emotion. And so I think if you can have both those things, because as humans, we're emotional. I think we need a certain level of human emotion, obviously. But just the branding side is interesting. You're listening, by the way, to the after show with some good friends here, presented by Poster. So here's a great example of the church. Here's an example of church and brand. So I had a friend who moved, and this is just to kind of recap what we've been talking about, but I had a friend move to a new city, and he was told by a pastor dude, hey, listen, you need to go to this church because it's like it was being planted out of a really kind of hot and moving church planting organization here in Canada. And so it was like, you need to go here. And this pastor was basically saying to him, you've moved to this new city and you need to go to this church because they have a big vision. And so my friend was like, okay, cool. And he just thought it was interesting, just the idea of being told that this guy in this church, this new church, has a big vision. And so he went and he said, listen, like it was great. It was a pretty good experience, obviously a new church or whatever. But he said, it's funny just around the idea of big vision, because basically he said what they did is what every other church did. They had music, they had teaching that somebody taught. They pushed people to small groups, pretty much like every other church did. And he just came away from that experience going, it was so funny because basically that church was doing the same thing as all these other churches, whether they were a year old or 100 years old. He kind of felt like it was the same thing. And his thought to me was, I don't get the idea of big vision, because he said the same churches all around have kind of the same vision. And he just thought, it just got me thinking kind of about the brand experience, because I think it's easy, maybe that church did it better. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the music, he said the music was great, or maybe the pastor dude is wearing skinny jeans, which I am all for. That's the only ones that I can wear. But I think we do need to be careful. Oh, I'm getting Facebook messages. Can you hear me? Yeah. I just get thinking about the whole, like, obviously the brand, kind of the Jesus brand experience versus identity in Jesus on a personal level. But on a church level, I think we need to be careful as well. Because that was just an experience to me to go, we need to be careful to make things seem like they're better than what they really are. And I forget who it was said, I forget which theologian just talked about the idol of vision. I think his idea was that God hates visionary leadership, was his idea. And obviously it's hyperbole. We have a vision, we have a brand, we have a logo as a church, but the idea is to fall so in love with your particular brand that you're missing the whole point. And that experience with that friend, who the pastor dude said, hey, you need to go here because they have an amazing vision. It was just interesting to hear him come away and go, all the churches pretty well have the same vision, and that's going to be fleshed out in different ways. Some churches may have good music, others may not. It is what it is. It just gets me thinking just about this particular dialogue and just the reality that the first thing these guys drill down on and saying that's the most important in Resilient Disciples is identity. And then the second thing I just want to talk about for these next few minutes is communion with God. So funny, eh? Like, of all the things sometimes we can put our attention to, really the thing that Resilient Disciples are doing is they're cultivating in community and then beyond intimacy with God. What do you think? Did that stand out? What is it? What do you think it says to kind of our moment right now and all that we've talked about?
Well, how do you define communion with God? And the first thing to me that comes to mind is being in a relationship with Him. Mm-hmm. And that can manifest itself in different ways. Prayer, whether it's devotionals or just speaking with God constantly, or being in community, communion. Yep. Yeah, so I think that it's it's a central part of our Christian faith is to be able to have that communion. Otherwise, things remain shallow. I think we talked a lot about depth here, or the lack of depth. But if we are in communion, we're, I guess, better. We're in a better position to experience God.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So people question worship as a lifestyle, not just an event. Prodigals were like 20%, but it seemed like Resilient Disciples were 91% in responding to that, or reading the Bible makes me feel closer to God. Again, high percentages. And then when it got down to talking with Jesus, I recognize that I spend time with Jesus, 87%. Jesus speaks to me in a way that is relevant to my life, 83%, and so forth. So it's interesting that amongst all the brand identity from the kind of the evangelical complex over the years, and again, as we've talked, it's not all bad. This idea of intimacy with God is the thing that's at the center. Be interesting, Yeah, go for it. No, go, Kendra. Yeah.
Oh no. Well, I was just thinking when I first read it, when I first read the term resilient disciple, it reminded me of something from my degree, which surprisingly is in child and youth studies.
Whoa, I did not know that.
Who knew?
And here you are.
I was a teacher because that's all I knew. Life changes. So anyway,
yeah, but did you know Hermione? How do you say it? Hermione is, it's actually Hermione and not Hermione, because if you did, you're way ahead. But anyways, continue.
That makes me feel a lot better because I made a fool of myself in university many times, fresh off the homeschool boat. But anyway, they use the term resilient as an identifier, like an indicator of children. Oh. And it's fairly researched, but it's really hard to grow someone into resiliency as a kid. They would research kids who have been through many difficult situations, but there was nothing that sort of was like, this is what makes a resilient kid, this is what doesn't. In the research, you either were or you weren't. Mm-hmm. You were kind of born that way. It was a temperament thing. But I think the difference here is that we say resilient disciples, but I think what we're talking about is more like a resilient relationship. Mm-hmm. So like in terms of humans, like what makes a resilient relationship seem to be a little bit more of the indicators that he's talking about here.
Yeah.
And so then we say resilient disciple, it's kind of like a resilient relationship with Christ, like what makes a resilient relationship. And so communion would, of course, be central to that.
What you need to do is you need to take your headphones right now, and you need
to hear me.
You need to drop them, because you just dropped the mic. That was incredible.
I totally misunderstood.
No. See, I would turn it.
You didn't hear any of it.
No, we got it all, and it was really good. It was really good.
Oh man,
I like
then
that.
I floundered it.
No.
Does that make sense though?
Yeah. So good, Kendra. Thank you for sharing that. So good. Prayer. Obviously, this is the way that this is kind of done. I mean, obviously there's more than just prayer, but like when we talk about foundational communication and life with God, this is it, prayer. And I've just been really convicted. One, I shared my own story of the last few years, just feeling like, am I like putting it on here? Just being brutally honest, and then kind of stumbling into fixed hours, and how that was really interesting as a charismatic kid growing up in the church, where prayer was like fire. And it was good. And like,
was it?
We are people yeah, it was, like I think in these discussions, like the one thing, even the talk about like the Jesus brand, it's so good to be in a position where you look, because I love how you joke, was it? But like, I think I can look back and go, yeah, there were some really good things about that. But again, on this side had felt maybe like I've been left a little, it's my own doing, left a little empty here until I walked into fixed hours. And then it's still been a struggle, but now it's like, okay, at least there's some sort of rhythm. What are your guys' thoughts on prayer? Especially now as we get older and here we are and we've been around for a while. Anything stand out maybe about fixed hours? I'm not, and certainly this is not to say that everybody has to do that, but how has that been for you guys? Let me throw it over to you.
I have a question about fixed hour prayer. So is it just like a reminder 3 times a day, or do you, and you just like pray, or do you read prayers?
Yeah, I
like
read prayers. Yeah.
So you read prayers.
Yeah. Sorry, I maybe should have made that more clear. Yeah. So through an app, there are liturgies from Common Prayer. There's a guy named Shane Claiborne who many people have heard. He has put it together, but they've just stolen prayers from the church mothers and fathers. That they put in the app. So morning, midday, and evening. And so for one, we can talk about this. I think we need to really stop being afraid of scripted prayers, because I actually think it's a thing that for those of us that grew up charismatic, we never heard nothing of this stuff, but it's so important.
You have to make your own stuff as you went along.
Right.
Oh my gosh. That's why I'm saying it.
And you had to be fast.
Okay.
I'm
traumatized. I'm still traumatized.
Okay,
I think people say popcorn prayer and you see me leave the room. Like I'm doing this right now. I will not participate in popcorn prayer.
So Heather is over here and she can't hear what you're saying, but she would totally just jive with that right now. Some of the trauma of that. Hey, popcorn prayer, Heather? Oh my gosh, she said. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What did you say? popcorn tongues. She said, "Well, that's
okay.
That's a whole nother."
That's my experience.
Yeah.
That is what turned me completely. Like it was youth camp. I was a leader, and it was like everyone's praying in tongues.
Yeah.
Now go. I was like, ah.
Yeah.
My kid has to go to the bathroom right now.
Did you guys go through the experience of falling over?
Yes, we're going there. I love this.
I feel compelled. Should I fall over? Is this the point where I fall over?
There was definitely moments up at the altar where you're kind of looking around and being like, I hope I'm not the only one that hasn't fallen.
Okay, we should explain this. This is Pentecostal. We should explain this for listeners.
Kendra's like, what the? What?
Exactly.
No. Been there.
Oh, okay.
Been there. Oh, yeah, been there.
You know how I got through popcorn prayer? So again, as a teenager, growing up in evangelical, sort of Pentecostal, copy your parents. So
Yeah.
I would just copy what the things my parents would say in prayer. You kind of just are able to kind of pull up on that. So when you do your popcorn prayer thing and you don't know what to say, you just go back to, mom said this morning in her prayer when I heard her during her.
Yeah.
And you kind of capture those little ones. And I know for me, that's what
true.
I did. That's how I survived my teenage years in evangelical.
Such anxiety.
So great.
But think about it, like prayer should not cause anxiety.
Yes.
And it does for me. And Kevin always like gets upset because I won't pray out loud. And I'm like, no, it's personal. And it's like, well, no, I should be able to do this. But reading prayers, that's game changer.
And that's what we do. Well, like we do more of the song. Well, that's what we do at Praxis. That's why we do that. I can't tell you how many people have said, "Wow, like thank you" at the end of the gathering, because and this is not a judgment thing, but for some of those scripted prayers that we do at the end, that's the first time out loud in the week people, and that this is not a judgment thing, but help. I think one of the things the church wants to do is help people. So that's why we do these scripted things at the end, sending us out in the world, a common collective prayer. By the way, and I don't know if you caught this in the teaching, this was nothing to do with the book, but I was blown away actually. Greek to English, when we hear about the New Testament church, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to all these things. And you're like, yeah, Pentecost. The better translation from Greek to English is the prayers. We lose some things, obviously, in English, just the way language works. And that is because they probably had, we don't know this for sure, but I think they had common prayers. And other people would say the translation of that would say the prayers. Wait, what? Not prayer, but the prayers. Interesting. So, yeah. So, we're running out of time. But so is there a balance, do you think? Because it's interesting. So I share my fixed hour prayer, and I think people are starting to jive with that a bit. They're discovering it not just through what we're doing at Praxis, but they hear other people talking about the daily office, this 3 times a day, these rhythms. Maybe scheduling is a good thing and better compared to my classic, and this was Drew Fess, spontaneous, I'm praying at all times. Yeah, my famous thing was, I'm like Paul, I pray without ceasing, and that was just BS. I don't pray at all. But is there a balance between some of the things we've joked about, about faith and allegiance and being together with the church and praying, and what we've talked about here? Because I think there is a bit of a balance. That's why I don't want to necessarily throw everything out, from the past. What's the balance there, do you think, as far as communion, intimacy, when the church gets together? I don't know. What do you think?
I was saying to Nicole, I think sometime this week, that I have a lot of respect for Muslims, and I always have, because one of the things they do really well and religiously is that they pray multiple times. So we've had some Muslim friends come through our house, and even for a visit, for instance, and they would ask for a room where they can go and pray for 5 minutes.
Crazy.
And they do this 3, 4, 5 times a day. And it's really impressive to me, just their dedication. And I think that, would I do that myself? Probably not. I think some of that might be a bit extreme, but I still have, a lot of respect for that. Because, in the busyness of our lives, we tend not to pray at all. I speak for myself at times. So just, finding that balance, I think, is important. It's key. And for it might be different for a busy family. It might be different for somebody that might have a little bit more time. But it might be different for, I don't know, for a couple. It's different from person to person, I think.
Yeah.
Do you guys do grace?
Like at dinner time?
Like before dinner?
Like before dinner?
Mm-hmm. Do you do grace? Yeah, that was kind of a weird
No,
question,
yeah.
But I just, I like forgot grace along the way, I guess. Like I just stopped doing it. But somehow I want to say around early in pandemic, I like brought back grace, whether I'm just like by myself here in a tiny apartment or if I'm with someone else. It could be COVID just because, times seem maybe a bit more scarce and whatever, but I've really liked grace lately.
Awesome.
That's all.
I think actually fixed things can be embedded in some of those type of rhythms. The Shema, when you leave so the Shema was this great prayer of Israel. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with the words. And it was like when you leave the door, when you walk the path, when you sit down to eat, like these were kind of in the oral, I think oral kind of passings on that the Jewish community had kind of picked up on this. When you lay your kids to bed, this Shema was said, love the Lord your God with heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I do, even Daniel, again, we said he turned to Jerusalem. This is what got him in trouble. I think it's, turning towards Jerusalem and doing actually what the Muslim community did, but to Yahweh. And I actually said a few years ago, and it didn't, not that there was any pushback, but I said, man, I got some mad props for our Muslim friends because they're putting me to shame as a pastor guy. This is free therapy right here for me, just to say like, I'm growing in this process of realizing, wow, like maybe those fixed hours. I think as a charismatic, in the best sense kind of community, because that's what we want to be, is engaging these two things together. You want people to be comfortable in the best sense and not out of place when it comes to prayer and prayer gatherings and whatnot. What if we could bring that together with fixed hour? I think one of the things you realize with the whole youth culture, a Jesus brand experience thing, all the way down to prayer, it's taking the best of what we have. And I think fixed hour has been helpful for some of us, and not something that everybody has to do, but I know for my life has now centered me and grounded me a bit to say, okay, this is, I'm praying the prayers of people that have gone before us. And that's why we've entered into some of the scripted things we have at Praxis. We're not bored. We're not trying to fill time. There is something powerful when the shyest person in the room has the opportunity with everybody to open their mouth and speak. So lots of room to grow with this, but this is great. I'm just honestly, it's the best, having just a great time with you guys. And just excited about the series. This coming Sunday, what we're going to do, everybody, is we're talking about something I think is really important. We're going to get into the second principle, which is cultural discernment. And next week's discussion is going to... Do the kids say lit? Is that bad? Is there any bad connotation with that? Okay. So honestly, I'm so out of touch. Yeah, I think we'll have a lot of good conversation just out of... just cultural discernment, because this is the one thing the church doesn't talk about. Cultural discernment. We talk about practices, doing all these things, and serving in church and building community. All of those things are important, but one of the things that is very important in Resilient Disciples is just looking at cultural discernment and how we are in the world but not of it. So it's gonna be good. We hope you can join us. If you just want to continue to follow us on the Practice Podcast. You can find us on any podcast catcher. Is that, again, I don't know. I heard that somewhere, and I just like that term, but I guess that's not really a term.
He said something in the book, didn't he? Didn't he say it?
Podcast? I don't know.
He said a word that I was like, I'd never heard of that before.
Find us wherever podcasts are found, and you can watch us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel at Praxis. We love y'all. We can't wait to see you next week. Hopefully you can continue the journey with us. See you soon.
Yeah.
Peace.